I made a video before about performance in our applications. I defined a thing that I call the line of Prime, which is the point where somebody like Primeagen, who's really good at making performant, scalable solutions, might want to come in and make sure your application is ready for scale. It doesn't matter how big your company is or how big the project you're working on is. If flexibility is necessary, or you're still trying to figure out what your users need, the API is going to change. The design is going to change. The things you're building are going to change. And the more change that is happening in the code base you're working in, the more you benefit from flexibility and the less you benefit from performance. Eventually, you'll hit a point of stability where you're not adding as many new features, you're not changing things once they're specced out, and you have many more users and can benefit a lot more from a more performant solution. And I will never say Rust isn't good at that point. Rust is a phenomenal solution when the specs ironed out, the plan is solidified, and you just want to make something that runs really, really well. I know a lot of people say Rust isn't all about the performance, it's about the safety, but that's kind of the benefit here too, is once things are kind of solidified to the point where pouring cement over, locking this thing in place, Rust makes a lot of sense for that because it makes it hard to make wrong changes, but it also makes it harder to make quick changes too. And crazy enough, Prime's finally accepting this. For a while, he would push saying that he could move just as fast in Rust as he could in other languages. And while that hasn't changed, his tune around it has a bit. I want to show you guys a Prime video I watched recently where he talks a bit about this and go over it with y'all.
You know, I kind of compete on which one's faster. Is just JavaScript or Rust? Which one's faster? I don't know. I'm not good enough at OCaml to really be able to run with that one yet, but I feel like as of right now, they're about the same thing. Like if I can't use CLI tools, those two are about the same thing. But once I go beyond something simple, Rust is great when I know what I want to do, right? When I already have the idea in my head and it's a very self-contained program. Like I can imagine writing out a CSV parser is a lot, it makes a lot of sense because the problem, the domain is a very, very understood, well, shall I say understood? That's a very funny phrase. But the domain is in some sense well understood. There's a set of rules that must be applied, and you just got to apply those rules in a linear fashion, and boom, you're good to go. So to me, that seems like such a W, right? That seems like such an easy win. It's well trodden. It's at least mostly understood. So a place with Rust in that.
I forget that you don't edit your own videos, so you don't listen to yourself often, Prime. But crazy enough, a lot of us do like listening to you, and I am one of them. So yeah, I absolutely loved this. The joke I was saying before, and I think makes sense here, is that you realized you're not always on the other side of the line of Prime. What I defined previously in my line of Prime video was this concept of a point where the amount of flexibility you need, because you're adding new features, you're changing the spec, you're doing all these different things, the amount that is necessary over time goes down, and the amount of use your service get ideally goes up. At which point, using technologies that don't necessarily make it easy to iterate and change your feature set, change the way that you're solving the problem or the solution you're building in the first place, but do help you scale that solution, maintain it over time, and write code that you can confidently look at 5 years from now, and it will work the same way and it will tell you when you're screwing up. Rust is a phenomenal solution for that in particular. This isn't just it goes faster or performs better. This is also the code makes it harder to do the wrong thing and experiment. And that is a positive thing once you hit a certain point in the confidence you have in the spec that you're building. And I put Prime's line at a certain point where the amount of flexibility you need in your application design and speccing goes down, and the amount you need performance or maintainability at scale goes up. What Prime has realized is that a lot of what he does actually falls on the other side of this line. Like when he was describing the CSV parser, that kind of fits on the left here because you don't know what you're parsing or what you need specifically around that. And as such, a lot of the technologies that Prime uses don't necessarily have a great experience when you're on this side, when you're actively iterating and changing the code that you're writing constantly. The harsher way of putting this is most of the code I write on this side is meant to be thrown away. If the majority of the code I wrote in my life isn't deleted before I die, I'll be disappointed. That means I failed. Because ideally, the code I write is going to make good solutions, and eventually people will have to replace those with better, more maintainable code solving the same problems. It's kind of like what happened with Webpack, where Webpack was rewritten in Go with ES-Build. Some flexibility was necessary there, and Go was actually a good choice where it kind of fits in the middle here. And with Go, they were able to make a better Webpack that much, much faster. But now that we know what that looks like, there's effort going in for TurboPack, which is written in Rust, Rust, and it's taking way longer for them to build. There's a team of 10 super talented engineers working full time on it versus ESBuild, which was the CTO of Figma got bored and worked on it on the side and built something 1,000 times faster than Webpack in days because he was bored. That difference is meaningful. And I think Golang is a really strong language for being the in-between here. OCaml's starting to come more and more over to our side here on the left, the fast iteration too. But generally speaking, sometimes you just have to be able to break things and move fast. And sometimes you need to stop breaking things and move slow. And knowing where you are is one of the most important skills you can develop as a software engineer. Knowing what problems need a rusty solution where you can leave it for 5 years, come back, and it's still running incredibly well. It's still easy to maintain. And when you make a change, you immediately know if it's wrong. Or if you just need to make something that goes fast and gets out fast, use Golang. Or if you're already working mostly in web app technologies and you just need to add an endpoint to your app quick, there's no shame in using TypeScript and JavaScript for that type of thing. But as a developer, and more importantly, as an engineer, understanding where you are and where the thing you're building is on this chart is really, really important. And while I baited y'all saying Prime's coming around to my take on this, I don't think his opinions actually changed too much here. I think his experience has him talking a little differently. I think we always agreed about this. The benefit of Rust isn't just that it's really fast or that it's way better than TypeScript. The benefit is how much more stable everything around it is meant to be. And stability isn't always a benefit for everything you're building. On top of that, I think we overestimate how much exists on this right side. But generally speaking, it's important to have solutions there. And I'm pumped that we have somebody like Primeagen talking about them because it's not what we're focused about here. This channel's more in pursuit of product market fit, regardless of the size and scale that you're building at. Rust isn't for that. I will say, though, I love that Prime has been so transparent about his realizations here. A lot of developers aren't willing to do something that seems like taking an L here, where he said that picking Rust for projects at work might not have been the best choice. And I don't know if it's in this video or not, but I've heard him in other videos specifically say that he kind of regrets picking Rust for certain projects because when the spec changed, it got really hard to shift it around. And while he had a clear vision for how to build it initially, when changes had to be made, that clear vision kind of broke down and Rust didn't make it easy enough to make those types of changes. And it's really cool to have somebody with real work experience using these technologies, explaining how this line works in practice and in reality. So huge shout out to Prime for both trying these things, really pushing them in work, but more importantly, talking about what does and doesn't work with them. I feel like there's so many fanboys that aren't willing to do that. So yeah, fantastic work, Prime. Thank you as always. If you haven't already watched my video about the performance line of Prime and all of this, pin that in the corner. Really proud of that one. Hope that you enjoyed this as well. It's a super fun rant. Thank you guys as always. Peace, nerds.